Jonathan Phillips, the father of Dr. Phillips, was panting as he wildly sprinted down a long, dim hallway. He had been running for what felt like forever. In reality, only a few minutes had passed since he first stormed the abandoned hospital and began running. But for numerous days now, on this backwards Earth in a foreign universe, Jonathan had been pursued. This world's authority had initially interrogated him upon making contact, as every single human in this world was digitally documented upon birth and implanted with a tracking chip. When no signals came from the multiversal traveler, they knew he wasn't from this reality. While they were capable of viewing and communicating with other worlds, their methods for travel were crude and rudimentary to say the least. They desperately wanted Jonathan's refined technology. The device on his wrist that resembled a large watch had served him well, taking him to all manner of universes. He had seen and experienced more than anyone he had met thus far. One fact always remained. He could not allow the device to fall into anyone else's hands, regardless of who they were or what the situation was. It either stayed on his wrist or perished along with him. So, Jonathan kept running, pushing his legs beyond their breaking point. But that's what adrenaline does to the human body. He wasn't even sure if he was more panicked about losing his tech, or if the thought of never seeing his son again drove him forward. But several armed men were chasing him, each of them highly trained for hunting and capturing other humans. To them, this was a simple game they had played thousands upon thousands of times over. To Jonathan, this was about fate. It was about ensuring the security and balance that existed between alternate realities. This was an Imperial, entirely militarized version of Earth. The human race had never evolved socially or politically beyond having a royal family that dominated everything. So, democracies like the United States never came to exist. The entire continent was taken, yes, but the colonizers never sought freedom from the British mainland. The loyalty of human beings in this world was equivalent to discipline. However, under the ruling of a corrupted and power-hungry royal family, with entirely selfish and violent ambitions, this led humanity down a path of conquering and abusing the weak. Somehow, technology skyrocketed at a rate unseen by many other Earths. Perhaps this was because culture, entertainment, and other distractions never quite existed here. Jonathan needed to get far enough away that he could use the device to leave. But they were mere seconds behind him, shouting various warnings for him to stop. They would have to pry it off of his dead body. Of course, he had taken measures to ensure that it would self-destruct if his heart were to ever stop, or even slow to a comatose state. He had recently managed to install this upgrade on a much more peaceful, highly advanced world. It was here that he found his bearings and came to understand more of the multiverse. A single soldier was closing in on Jonathan. As the latter began to slow, when exhaustion inevitably arrived for its toll, the man dressed like part of a SWAT team reached for the back of Jonathan's collar. "Stop!" the soldier barked, and the two of them stumbled forward, collapsing to the floor. The inventor ensured that as they crashed, his weight in the form of his elbow smashed into the face of his attacker. This drove the back of his head into the tile floor, knocking him out and perhaps even killing him. There was a little bit of blood, but even if he had killed him, Jonathan could not think about that now. He had been forced to murder people in order to preserve the device's neutral existence. This minor scuffle was a major setback. However, as it allowed for the others to nearly close the gap between them and Jonathan, he knew he had to keep going. "We got him!" one of them declared as they moved in, reaching within 30 feet of him. Jonathan sprang to his feet and found the strength to drag himself onward, quickly turning a corner just in time to avoid a barrage of bullets. "Stop firing!" the man leading the squad bellowed at the rest. When they lowered their weapons to frown at him, he scowled in return. It was an alternate version of the psychic dreamer, Cole. In this world, he was a commanding officer for high-level raids, military conflicts, and even assassinations. He was somewhat close to the royal family and considered a high military asset. "Fools," Cole murmured, glaring at the rest of them. Our king wants this man alive, no matter what the cost. The highest punishment will befall anyone who kills him. The group looked uneasy for a moment before Cole pointed down the hallway. He's getting away, the psychic growled. Go! The pursuit continued, as Jonathan had managed to gain back the little bit of ground he had before. He took advantage of every twist, turn, and exit door that he could find. This hospital had long since been attacked, and most signs that would lead someone out were faded, destroyed, or simply gone. There's no telling what transpired here or how many years ago it was. From the mess left behind, Jonathan imagined soldiers ripping patients from their beds, executing them along with hospital staff as fire and explosions washed over the city. Again, these were thoughts that he could not afford right now. He had to focus. He had to continue pushing himself and find a way to steal more distance from his pursuers. Sadly, Jonathan turned his seventh corner only to find another group of men waiting for him. They were in a formation that completely blocked the hallway and all nearby doors. The inventor could already hear the chaotic footsteps of those behind him, and he sighed. There was no way around it. He was trapped. He thought of his son, and then he smiled. At least he would die knowing that his device perhaps saved his son. There you are, Cole commented as the others approached from the rear. He needlessly pushed his way to the front and looked the inventor over, measuring him. You know, for such a lanky guy, you're quick, Cole remarked while tilting his head. He had glimpsed into other worlds while in his dreams, as was the nature of his psychic ability, and seen the version of himself that was kept as a lab rat by Dr. Phillips. Although he didn't know anything about Jonathan, much less that he was the doctor's father, he wouldn't have said anything to either help the inventor or save his alternate self. In this world, indifference ruled morality. I don't know what world you came from, but your little adventure stops here, Cole continued, taking another step forward. The king wants to speak with you personally, so give yourself up, along with that fancy watch you're wearing, and we'll be square. I'll ignore that you killed one of my men. Jonathan concealed his wrist that wore the device within his open jacket, narrowing his eyes at such a demand. Absolutely not, he told Cole, and his expression was made of stone. I would sooner die fighting you all, right here, right now, before I would ever oblige your king. Cole groaned. Come on, man, throw me a bone here. I'm supposed to bring you in alive. Whether or not your legs are broken is entirely up to you. Cole was almost desperate to be the one to capture Jonathan. Bringing in such a valuable find would surely benefit him in the long run. He could see promotions, better living conditions, and more respect in his future. The inventor raised his chin and locked eyes with Cole, who could see the determination that had long rooted itself. You have got to be kidding me, Cole said as he handed his weapon to one of his men and began approaching Jonathan. But, before he could reach the other man, a familiar but much darker version of a woman seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. She grinned at Cole, standing just behind Jonathan. She wasn't very tall, standing only a few inches above 5 feet. But in this world, she had full mastery over her psychic abilities, able to freely teleport herself in mere seconds anywhere on the planet. Her physical strength and training made her a formidable opponent. This often led to her controlling her own fate while dreaming of other worlds, physically influencing other people and events. Here, her hair was cut incredibly short, only a few inches in length and dyed white. But she was still quite youthful in her appearance. This made her both alluring and intimidating to most men, but this was intended. Oh, this keeps getting better, Cole grumbled, shaking his head at the mere sight of his colleague. Hello, Cole, the young woman said to him. Winter. He said only her name as acknowledgement, because he only respected her, soldier to soldier, and nothing more. This was mostly born from jealousy practiced quietly from a distance. The dreamer known as Winter suddenly grasped the inventor's shoulder, and they vanished, leaving a faint gust of psychic energy that dissipated as soon as it had formed. Jonathan was now in a massive throne room made of dark metal, and while the lights were dim, they were intense to look at. He was shoved forward, and as he stumbled to his knees, his instincts and racing adrenaline naturally brought him back to his feet. But before he could pull himself up, a closed fist struck the back of his head. This slowed Jonathan long enough for him to realize that over 24 men had weapons focused on him, specifically at his legs. He suspected now that they somehow knew they shouldn't kill him if they wanted the device to remain operational. Before him were a series of steps that led to a man sitting in what must have been a throne. His hands rested on his knees, and his thick arms were covered in barbaric tattoos that seemed to indicate that he was a capable warrior. He wore a sleeveless black cloak that covered his dark hair, and his bearded face had red eyes that sunk right into the inventor's soul. He was measuring Jonathan in almost every strategic way possible. This, by all accounts, without a spoken word, was an Imperial man by nature, a powerful but often corrupted ruler. "You're thin," the seated man remarked. "Like so many other realities, yours must be peaceful and therefore lacking." "It wasn't peaceful," Jonathan murmured, glancing over his shoulder at Winter. "I managed to escape it just before war had torn it apart." "So, your strength is of the mind," the king pointed to his wrist, "of creating and navigating, exploring the science behind what is otherwise psychic understanding." Jonathan once again pulled the device beneath his jacket, concealing it from the view of others. "I am King Mordred." He offered his name. "And yours?" "Jonathan," was all the inventor said. "I want to know about the device on your wrist," King Mordred said, tilting his head. "Initial scans not only showed the absence of any documented identity, but that your clothes and the device are made from similar yet slightly different materials than what we have here. Your body, for that matter, has properties that read just the same. So, how did you get here?" When Jonathan said nothing, Winter kicked him in the back of the head, just hard enough to make him wince. "You will appease King Mordred," she warned him, and the king raised his hand. But it wasn't to silence Winter, or to even stop her. As the king began to twist his wrist, Jonathan felt a psychic pull on his entire body, and suddenly his ribcage felt as if it were collapsing inward. The inventor wheezed before keeling over and groaning in pain. Unbeknownst to everyone else, Jonathan had already programmed the watch to deliver him from this hellish nightmare of an Earth. While he hadn't been able to exactly coordinate where it would take him, that could be his next concern. For now, he had to focus solely on escaping his current predicament. "I possess more than one or two simple abilities," King Mordred explained, closing his hand so that it felt as if the air was being squeezed right out of Jonathan's lungs. The inventor reached beneath his jacket with his other hand, but in a way that made it seem as if he were trying to ease the suffering in his ribcage. What he hadn't anticipated, however, was that Winter would place her hand on his shoulder at the exact moment that he would activate the device, removing both of them from this reality and dropping them randomly into another.